guilty, not guilty, 10
Charles
times.
Manson, described today by the star witness
Jury in
again.
the so-called Night Stalker case reached its verdict today.
Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of
The woman
murder.
suspected of shooting Selena is still holding police at
Music
bay.
producer Phil Spector was convicted
In
Monday.
Los Angeles, a killer the police are calling the Hillside Strangler.
Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes.
Welcome back to LA Legal. I'm Leanna. This is Nima. I'm back after a very short break. Nima, how was hosting without me?
Not the same.
Not the same?
No, we need you.
Okay,
so.
cool. I'm hearing rumors that we're getting picked up for season 3, so I'm just making sure you can stay there and not here.
No, absolutely. That seat is irreplaceable, so I'll stay in my lane and stay on my couch and sit right here.
You heard it here first. So today we're going to be talking about something that you have been talking about for how many months?
Oh, months.
Like, for months and months and months.
I'm so excited to be reliving probably the biggest trial, or at least top 2 of our lifetime.
100%. And so for those of you who haven't guessed, we will be talking about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, the trial of the century. And so Nima Rahmani did a lot of correspondent work on this. He's done a lot of TikToks, YouTube shorts, whatever. So check us out, YouTube, TikTok, shameless plugs. But yeah, let's do this. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, I still get questions about Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, so I'm really excited to do this.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah, to do this longer form analysis.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, let's do it. So from the media circus surrounding the courthouse to complete chaos in the courtroom, the Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard trial was the most watched trial since the People v. O.J. Simpson. But how exactly did Amber Heard and Johnny Depp get to this point? So they first met in 2009 when they were filming the movie called The Rum Diary, but their romantic relationship didn't start until later in 2012 after Depp's divorce was finalized. So he got engaged to Amber Heard in 2015, and then they got married several months later. She filed for divorce 15 months after their marriage and got a temporary restraining order against Depp for alleged abuse. And so this is how everything unraveled. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so, I mean, this case brings in so many elements, right? You have the celebrity factor, of course. Johnny Depp, A-list celebrity. Even Amber Heard, probably before this, maybe not but, I mean, she was, an actress in her own right. You have drugs. You have sex. You have cameras in the courtroom. You have basically a redo after, and I want to talk about it, after Johnny Depp lost in the UK filing for defamation. So, the gloves were off.
I mean, this is the type of case where everyone was talking about. Like, we're lawyers, right? So we like to listen and watch trials for various reasons. I had friends who could give a you-know-what about law, and everyone was glued to their TV, listening to this thing on their way to work. It was all over TikTok, social media. I mean, this thing was insane. It was chaos.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had people texting me, tweeting me, DMing me at 6 a.m. Pacific when the trial started. And, obviously I do a lot of court TV and law and crime, and their viewership was like 20x, maybe even more because of this. So really, I mean, the level of interest, non-lawyer interest, obviously we're nerds, we cover these cases all the time, but the amount of non-lawyers who...
But what do you think was it? Was it Johnny Depp, or was it just these crazy... You have people shitting in the bed, is that what...
Well, yeah, I mean, look, people will line up the night before, right? I mean, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for a seat in that courtroom. I think it's a combination of a couple of factors. Everyone loves Johnny Depp. Women love him. I mean, you saw the gallery, literally all women, right? And men hate Amber Heard. They view her as the face of false accusations, Me Too gone too far. So they were just loving her go down in flames. So
well, yes, and I think she did it. She brought it all on herself, because this was a case that revolved around, in my opinion, credibility alone, right? And Johnny Depp knocked it out of the park. Amber Heard was just a royal mess. And so I want to get into it. So
let's do it. And you're right. When it comes down to domestic violence, sexual assault, it really does come down to credibility. Usually there aren't witnesses to these types of offenses. And I'm not saying they didn't happen, but I think Amber Heard lost so much credibility because she lied about other things. And we're going to talk about that the jurors thought, well, if she lied about this, then maybe she lied about the abuse and the sexual violence as well.
Right. So here's what I think a lot of people were talking about, right? So Johnny Depp, everyone loves him. He's, a phenomenal actor. He's a household name. He's Captain Jack Sparrow. He's all these, lovable characters, right? Do you think he was putting on a show, or do you think he was truly, truly being genuine and honest when he was on that stand? Right? Because that's where a lot of people are like, the people who hate Johnny Depp are like, well, he's a great actor, he's acting.
Yeah, they're acting. I mean, obviously, he's one of the best actors of our generation, but I thought he was also one of the best witnesses I've ever seen on the stand. I mean, he was open, he was vulnerable. I mean, he would get up there and he talked about the abuse that he suffered, severe physical and psychological abuse at the hands of his mother, how he started abusing drugs at a very young age to escape. I mean, the sort of honesty and the vulnerability that he showed really led me to believe that, look, he is a very credible witness. So if you're Amber Heard and you're up against someone like Johnny Depp, who's so well liked, and, I mean, everyone in the courtroom, everyone who was watching said, wow, you really better put on a good performance. And she didn't, frankly.
I agree. And I think a lot of people's perspectives on this whole thing changed when he took the stand, right? Because we had the trial in England, so talk a little bit about that, right? And then after that, people were calling him a wife beater. I mean, he lost so many deals. He was basically he was being canceled.
Oh, totally.
And then, boom. This trial happens, and then he's just regained an insane kind of following. So let's talk about London.
Yeah, let's just talk about the UK. I mean, I have to agree. Johnny Depp's comeback is nothing short of extraordinary. I've never seen someone canceled, and then, the comeback. Now he's probably the most wanted actor in all of Hollywood. But let's talk about the UK case. And I was one of those talking heads, those legal analysts that didn't think he could win here in the US. And this is why. The case against the Sun in the UK. Obviously, Amber Heard was not a party to that case, but she was a witness and a very important witness. And for those of us who didn't really follow that trial closely, let me just do a quick, couple-minute recap. So the Sun, which is a British tabloid, published an article with a headline that said Johnny Depp is a wife beater. Johnny Depp sued. So a couple sort of important differences in the UK. In defamation cases, the burden is on the defendant to prove that the statements are substantially true. So it's a defense burden. Here in the U.S., when Depp sued, the burden was on him to not only prove the statements were false, that they were malicious. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that too. So the burden was on the Sun. And not only did they meet their burden, I think they proved, and again, it wasn't a jury trial, it was a bench trial. They proved that there were at least 12 instances, I believe, 12 or 13 instances where Johnny Depp was a wife beater, that it was substantially true. And again, you're talking about a statement that he's a wife beater, much more difficult statement to prove compared to what Amber Heard was talking about. She said that I'm a survivor of sexual violence, of domestic abuse. She didn't even mention Johnny Depp's name, right? So she was just talking about herself. Much easier path to victory for Amber Heard here in the U.S. than it was for the Sun in the U.K., but the Sun won. So Depp lost and he lost bad. So to come here to the U.S. with less favorable laws, I thought he'd lose again.
Right. Well, I mean, it's very, very hard to prove defamation here. So
especially when you're a public figure, right? So when you're a public figure, you have that additional burden. You have to prove actual malice, because if you put yourself out there in the public, the assumption is that, you're going to be able to withstand some of these types of attacks.
Yeah,
so
look at us, right? How do you put it?
So that malice, right? You have to prove that Amber Heard knew those statements were false. She was acting with reckless. I mean, again, higher standard than you typically have to prove in your typical defamation or other court case.
Right. So that's the UK case, and I think, and I agree with you. I think because he lost there, even people who weren't following it or didn't really understand, I think, in just like your average person's mind is like, okay, well, this must be true, right? Because he lost there. So then they come overseas, they come here, and then this becomes a huge media spectacle. And then Johnny Depp, takes the stand. And even me, right? Because I was like, I try to give women the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. How could he have done? And then I start listening to his testimony. I'm like, damn, there's more to this than we didn't know. And I think he did a phenomenal job. And I loved that whoever prepped him, I don't know if they just told him, just go tell your story, your side of it. But he did fantastically well. And so when Amber Heard took the stand, I mean, she has been made into a meme. She's been TikTok. I mean, it was great. Even you and I did a skit on her very, very flawed testimony. And nothing made sense. 1 and 2 did not add up at any point in time. And so what were your thoughts when you were watching her testify. Most of the time you're doing this live, right?
Yeah.
You're watching. So what was going through your mind when you're watching somebody testify and it's like a train wreck?
It is. I mean, it really was. I watched her go down in flames, and you know, maybe she was uncontrollable, or maybe her lawyers didn't advise her, but you know, there were key moments in the case where it seemed to me that she wasn't being credible, and as a result, it ended up costing her the case. I mean, I think she could have won, but let's talk about some of the very important lies in the case. The first, of course, was the multi-million-dollar pledge, right? You know, in the UK case, she testified that she donated millions of dollars to the Children's Hospital and the ACLU. And it turns out that she didn't. So during the case, during her testimony, she tried to she said, look, I pledged it, I planned to do it, but well, why did you say you donated it? So what I would have done, I would have advised her, well, it's easy to show that you didn't give this money. I would have said that, listen, I got this money in the divorce. I was planning to donate it to charity. That was the plan all along. But I got sued by my ex-husband, and I had to pay these expensive lawyers. So frankly, I just couldn't afford to make the donation. I'm embarrassed, but I'm here telling you the truth. Had she said something like that, I don't know if it would have ended up differently, but I'm like, okay, well, that's believable. But for her to affirmatively say that when I said I donated the money, I meant I pledged it, but I still haven't given the money, I just thought that lacked credibility.
Right.
A couple other things that came up, drug use. I mean, talked about Johnny Depp talking about abusing every drug really at a young age, just starting as a teenager. You know, Amber Heard is married to Johnny Depp. I mean, they lived together. During the whole time, I think she admitted to using drugs once, and that's because they were on a private jet and a flight attendant saw them and they took ecstasy together or Molly, MDMA, some type of drug. Do you expect me to believe the whole time you're with Johnny Depp, like he's using drugs on a regular basis, you've only used drugs once? Again, I didn't find that as credible. And then
the itinerary came up too,
Yeah.
right? And it was on their wedding itinerary
Yeah.
that, you know, there was like time
Yeah,
allotted
there was,
for
like,
like
drugs.
drug use,
Yeah.
you know?
So-
And so, okay, let me ask you this. Let's stop right there for a second. Her attorneys must have known about this. It must have at least come up in discovery, right? So how are you putting someone on the stand who you know is going to go on there and say,
Well, the attorneys did a poor job, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And the third thing, though, I want to talk about is the TMZ leak, right? You know, there's this video. I mean, it clearly came from Amber Heard's phone, right? TMZ ends up getting it. So she says, I have no idea how they got it. Well, clearly it's on your phone. You took it. Either you did it or assistant or someone was working
Somebody
for you
from
had
your
access. I
camp.
mean, come on, you know? Just say, I would have said, listen, I was filing for this restraining order. I know Johnny Depp has a very strong PR team. I wanted to get out ahead of it, and I wanted people to think that I was the victim. So that's why I wanted to show this video to TMZ and others, but to deny leaking it and then the TMZ.
I think she was afraid of seeming vindictive, but I think that would have been better for her than this, right? Because now she's just a flat out liar.
Yeah, so we talked about Amber Heard's 3 lies. I think there were 3 mistakes that her lawyers made as well. Obviously, the first is controlling their client, right? Getting her not to lie, getting her to tell the truth, you know, prepping her like Depp's lawyers did. It's obviously that's one kind of big category. But there's 2 other things that I think Amber Heard's lawyers did poorly. The first is managing their time. So the judge in the case, Judge Penny, I mean, she set very specific, hard deadlines for both sides. So this would be direct examination during their case in chief, a cross-examination of the other party's witnesses, any redirect. And frankly, Heard's lawyers ran out of time. They spent way too much time crossing Johnny Depp in a really not really an effective way. So by the time that Depp's initial part of the case in chief was done, Heard's lawyers had used more time than Depp's team had. So that's one. Very poor time management by Amber Heard's lawyers. And the third thing, of course, and we saw it all over social media, is the objections. My God. You know, Camille Vasquez just destroyed Elaine Bredehoff when it came to the objections. Again, it's someone that's been practicing apparently for more than 20 years, and she hadn't mastered the rules of evidence. So really some tactical mistakes, and then just some poor trial strategy on the part of Heard's lawyers.
I think she was a little unpredictable. She seems like from what we saw, right, throughout the duration of the trial, that she may have just surprised them. I mean, we've seen it with clients, right? They tell us one thing, and then we get to a very important interview or whatever, and they let's drop a bombshell. So maybe some things came up during trial that caused them to scramble a little bit, but I don't think her lawyers knew the full story.
Yeah, I don't think they did. And the bottom line is Johnny Depp's just much more likable, right? You had all these friends and family come out of the woodwork, right? Exes that testified. Oh, the other thing that the defense really screwed, they opened the door, right? When Kate Moss came and testified, it's like, come on, how stupid are you? Why are you bringing up? The judge said, look, she can't testify. You open the door, you start talking about her, and guess what? She testifies.
She's testifying, right.
So, yeah, 4 mistakes. And then, but Amber Heard, like, aside from her sister, who came to support this woman? Like, no one showed up at trial to corroborate anything that she said.
And they had some, old deposition testimony that they played. But these people didn't actually show up to the trial. And so I think if I were a juror, I'd be like, look, all these people are lining up to defend Johnny Depp, right? You have nobody on your side. That's a bad look.
Yeah, it is a bad look. And maybe it's sort of her narcissism, or she's been able to get away with it for so long. Here's someone that, like, Elon Musk was reportedly after. James Franco. Yeah. Everyone loved her. People thought she was the most beautiful woman in Hollywood. And maybe she thought she could get away with it. And then I guess the jurors just saw right through it.
Yeah, I think they did. And so I really liked the part of trial where Dr. Curry and Dr. Hughes, right? So now you have these psychologists that are coming in and discussing about the various sort of things that are happening here. I thought that was really powerful because Dr. Curry, like Johnny Depp, was just so strong, so likable, and she was just really on point. And then you bring Dr. Hughes, and then you're kind of like, what's going on here?
Yeah, Curry, I thought, did a good job. She diagnosed Amber Heard with borderline personality disorder, which is a pretty significant diagnosis. And some important parts of again, not a psychologist, but I've seen plenty of them on TV, so I can tell you the kind of two hallmarks of a borderline person is, one, this tremendous fear of abandonment, right? So every time Depp would try to leave, Heard would basically like fly off the handle because she was just afraid of losing him. That was one. And then using sex as a weapon. So it really kind of really fit the diagnosis and Heard's behavior. And I think
I also liked the holes that she poked in Dr. Hughes' testimony, right? So Dr. Hughes comes on and she talks about the various tests that she administered for Amber Heard to get to, this PTSD, and she says she suffers, greatly. And so Dr. Curry says, well, when you look at the questions that were being asked, right? So the questions that Amber Heard sort of understood logically, like what the answer should be, right? She gives them the textbook answer, and so the results are perfect, right, where they're supposed to be. But the questions that were asked for specific reasons, right, to get them to that PTSD diagnosis, she just completely flopped, right? And so that's how Dr. Curry was able to say that this is not an accurate test because it wasn't properly administered. And so again, that also exposes lies, right? So she's sitting with a psychologist trying to get to the bottom of this thing, and she's lying through her teeth to try to get to that diagnosis that's going to get her a victory in this trial. So I think she did a great job in that testimony, and I think, again, she showed the extent of the lies.
I agree. In terms of the battle of the experts, I think definitely Depp's side won.
Right. And they just were more prepared, They just all came on there, they did their thing, they testified, and it just, even with the witnesses on the other side, it was like a circus. Who was that very, very bad witness? I forget his name. He was this older gentleman for Amber Heard, and he was just a joke. I think he was talking about her. Okay, it'll come to me. But he was so bad. He was this older man with white hair, and he was talking, I think, about how much money she would have made.
Oh yeah, well yeah, we're talking about the Economist.
The Economist, there we go.
The lost earnings.
Right, the lost earnings. He was really, really bad. Remember him?
Yeah, the special damages experts. I don't think they were good. And honestly, on the damages themselves is interesting. There's a lot of talk about he lost what would have been Pirate 6, I think, and you had your Disney witness that said, listen, we decided not to cast him, regardless of the Washington Post op-ed. So I don't think that the special damages experts were good for either side, frankly, and it showed because really the award was for the kind of compensatory and punies. It was really kind of mostly, I thought, based on kind of the emotional distress. And
well, let's talk a little bit about the bruising, right? Because this was the story of the disappearing bruises.
Yeah, the bruised kid.
And this is also where I think she pissed off a lot of people who have been victims of domestic violence, right? And so, again, this is something I saw a lot on social media where people were posting photos of themselves. Like, I mean, you even had Rihanna. Remember her photo? It was everywhere. It's like, you'll never forget.
Who could forget Chris Brown and Rihanna, of course.
And then, then you have Amber Heard, who's claiming that her nose was broken and she has all these bruises. And then literally
like, you
the
look
next
at the picture,
day,
like, I mean, she looks flawless. Meanwhile, you have Johnny Depp. He has a severed finger. So.
right. And so what I wanted to know is, what makeup are you using? Because if it's covering that kind of bruising. But, it's not funny, because it really is something for people to get outraged, right? If you're really somebody who has experienced domestic violence, and you have somebody like Amber Heard who's potentially coming on and making light of the situation, it rubs people the wrong way, right? The very next day she's on like James Corden, there's like not a trace of anything on her, and then the following day she's got bruises. So I want to talk about it, right? Because this is where TMZ comes up, the whole courtroom, TRO, right? So let's talk about it. She goes to court to file a TRO. TMZ happens to show up. She claims she has no idea, yet she's posing perfectly for them to get her. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly they were tipped off, right? So just own up to it, admit to it. Look, TMZ, we have a great relationship with them. I've been on TMZ multiple times, but we're here in LA. They get information very quickly. But the fact that, look, if they happen to show up because someone at the courthouse tips them off, that's one thing. But they have the video. Come on. Yeah. I mean, you think TMZ is going to like have access to Amber Heard's phone? I mean, get out of here.
Right.
So.
And so the TMZ employee, or the ex-employee's testimony, was also very strong, because he actually explained in very great detail how they authenticate, right?
Yeah, how they authenticate, and they wouldn't have posted the video had they not determined that it came from Amber Heard's phone. Yeah. I mean, they're journalists. They're not going to post something that's fake. Right. So I thought that was helpful.
And I got to tell you, TMZ is almost 99% of the time spot on.
Oh yeah, I mean, people like criticize them, but like, I mean, especially here in LA. Yeah. They were the first to Kobe. Exactly. I mean, they're on it.
When I heard about Kobe, there's certain things that you hear and I'm like, is it on TMZ? Because if it's not, then it's not true. Yeah. So, you really can't question TMZ. But let's talk a little bit about the lawyers. Okay, I know you touched on it, but Camille Vasquez, right? I think she did a phenomenal job. Question for you. Did she do a phenomenal job because the other side was so bad? Or in your mind, do you think she really
I love
did?
Camille Vasquez, and I know she's a hero to many, but I really think Elaine Bredehoff respectfully did a poor job. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to overcome those objections. You got to prep your client better. I don't want to take anything away from Benchu and Vasquez. Phenomenal work, top-notch, great result. But I thought that Bredehoff in particular, and also Rottenborn, I have a lot of criticism of how they handled this particular case.
Did you hear that Kanye West recently hired Camille Vasquez?
Yeah, but she dropped him.
She dropped him after.
She dropped him after Kanye's the next to be canceled. So
I mean, I think he already is. Yeah. So okay, any final thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, let's just go quickly to the judgment, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about this and the inevitable appeal that is coming. So the judgment, we got $10 million for Johnny Depp with a $5 million punitive damages award. So 15 total. There's a cap on punitive damages there in Virginia. So those are reduced to $10.35 million. Surprisingly, though, Amber Heard got a $2 million judgment. Now, not against Depp, but against Depp's lawyer. Of course, we lawyers know that Depp is responsible for the judgment against his lawyer, because his lawyer came out and said the whole LAPD situation, which is literally like a mile away from where we're sitting right now, was a hoax. Oh, by the way, speaking of good witnesses, LAPD officers were great witnesses, I thought. So not surprising that Depp won. I think I was surprised at how high the verdict was, number one, but also surprised that Amber Heard even got a little bit of a piece of it, given sort of how bad her team did. So
I mean, look, I'm just glad that she kind of went away, right? Because her attorneys were on the morning news and just talking about this and that, and it was just like, just take the L and just be quiet. Like, let us all just kind of move on from this. Do you remember? It really was a circus.
Oh,
and it continued to be for a while.
Oh, it was. And I mean, obviously, they filed their appeal. Cases still pending while this podcast is being aired, so we'll see what happens. I don't think she has a particularly good chance, but she does raise some issues. The first is the First Amendment issue. We knew that would come up. She said that the judge improperly excluded some therapist notes where apparently she was describing this abuse. That sounds like hearsay to me. But we'll see what, if anything,
I don't think that's going
she
to be
can pull
very
out of her hat
helpful.
on appeal. I mean, because
all other things
yeah, when
considered.
you're dealing with a jury verdict and credibility issues, there's not much to appeal there.
Right.
But we'll see.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning in. This was a nice little recap, and hopefully this is the last of the Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.